You can find the name of the teachers, but for example you cannot find how many narrations narrated from them. You cannot find for each teacher, okay, they do not say this Rawi, this narrator narrated from that teacher this number of hadith, and from that teacher that number of hadith. You cannot find the numbers, you can find only the names. This is important. We have to calculate how many hadith did the narrator narrate from the teachers. At that time we could understand which teacher is important according to that Rawi, because you can find many names. For example, about Nafi', you can find about 30 names, but Nafi' did not narrate from most of them, only a single narration. So if we want to distinguish the importance between the teacher, first of all we should calculate how many narrations comes from them, and then we can classify the teachers. We can classify the teachers: effective teachers, passive teachers, and normal teachers, and then passive teachers. And now, average number of narrations per teacher. This is also important for a narrator. The ratio of the total number of narrations of a narrator to the total number of his teachers. This is average number of narrations per teacher. Assume a narrator, he has 5 teachers and he narrated from them all totally 100 narrations. Then it means if he narrated from them equally, then it means for every teacher there is 20 hadith. This is the average number. But in reality it's not the case. The narrator might narrate it from one of them 50, and from the other 10, and from the other 5, or from the other 3. So, but we should know the average number of narrations per teacher, because we will classify the teachers according this average number. And now, average number of teachers per hadith. The ratio of the total number of narrations of a narrator to the total number of his hadith. Assume a narrator now, he has 2 teachers, for example, and he narrated from them 100 hadith. 50 from he narrated from them 100 narrations, but 50 narrations from the first one and 50 narrations from the second one. But when you look to the hadith, to the narrations, you will find that some of them common between the teachers, the same hadith narrated from him and from him. Let's assume that the 50 hadiths narrated from the first teacher and other 50 hadiths narrated from the second teacher. Let's assume that they are the same. Then our narrator has 50 hadith, but he has 100 narrations. His narrations, half of his narrations from the first teacher and the second half from the second teacher. But these are the same ahadith. When you try to calculate this average, you will find that 100 narrations over 50 hadith, you will find the number 2. 2 means there is 2 teachers for every hadith. So this narrator received his hadith from 2 different teacher. So this average is important to see that there is how many teacher for every hadith in his narrations. If let's return back to the same example. If he received 50 hadith from the first teacher and 50 different hadith from the second teacher, then his total number of narrations is 100, but his hadith, his number of hadith is 102, because we assumed that the hadith all different between the two teachers. Then 100 over 100 is 1. So the average number the average number of teachers per hadith becomes 1. This number is important. When you calculate this number, we can see how many teachers for every hadith, fallen for every hadith in that narrator. The more, when this number increases, when this average is big for a narrator, it shows that narrator received the same hadith from many teachers. And this is important, and it's a nice thing for a narrator. But if it is 1, it cannot be less than 1. If it is 1, then it shows you that he didn't receive the same hadith from a second teacher. He receives the hadith only from single teachers. And now, number of effective teachers. Let's begin to classify the teachers of a narrator. First of all, effective teachers. The number of teachers of a narrator that he narrated mainly from them. A narrator may have many teachers, but he narrates mainly from few of them, from some of them. That teachers whom he narrates mainly from them, they are the effective teachers. For detail, to how to calculate the number of effective teachers, please look at my book Nafi' Mawla ibn Umar. Let's look at Nafi' Mawla ibn Umar, Umar's teachers here, teachers profile of Nafi' Mawla ibn Umar. For example, in Kutub al-Tis'a, there is about 500 narrations for Nafi' Mawla ibn Umar. But from 500 narrations, Nafi' narrates 462 of them from his teacher Abdullah bin Umar. And the second most narrating one is Safiya. And Safiya she is wife of Abdullah bin Umar. Look how narrow the source side of Nafi' Mawla ibn Umar. And that period, most of the narrators were the same. They were only narrating from their fathers or from their masters. But we know that at the same time there were many ashab, many companions of the Prophet ﷺ at that society. But Nafi' didn't go to them and narrate from them because they didn't feel that neediness. Everywhere you could find companion of Prophet. In every home there were still ashab, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. So they didn't try to collect the hadith. Nafi' only was seeing his master, his old master Abdullah bin Umar, and he is living with him. He heard from him naturally. Naturally he heard from him. He didn't go after the hadith. He didn't try to collect. So the narrators from that period, from the period of Nafi' Mawla, most of them, like most of them's teacher's profile will be the same. You will find a teacher has most of the narrations, and the second one, look, first one is 462 and the second one has only 14 narrations from the second, and from the third Salim 6 narrations, and the others in kutub, in books of Rijal, books of Al-Jarh wa Ta'dil, you can find about 30 shuyukh, about 30 teachers for Nafi' Mawla ibn Umar. But when you look in this way for his teachers, you will understand that Nafi' has effectively only one teacher. And now, number of normal teachers. The number of teachers of a narrator that he narrated above the average from them. The average is this average number of narrations per teachers. If a narrator narrates from a teacher, from one of his teachers, above the average, then that teacher named is normal teacher. And now, number of passive teachers, the number of teachers of a narrator that he narrated below the average from them. If a narrator narrates from one of his teachers below the average, then we say for that teacher is passive teacher. This passiveness and effectiveness according the narrator, it's not the effort of the teacher. The teacher does not do anything, he only narrates for his students. But some of the students narrates from him more, and this make that teacher according that narrator passive or effective or normal. For example, it may be a teacher passive according Nafi' Mawla ibn Umar, but the same teacher can be effective teacher for another narrator. It depends on the narrating of the narrator from him. When you look at a narrator and his teachers, you will notice that the big amount of the teachers, the big part of his teachers are passive.